At Team Toyota, they've been selling and servicing new and used Toyotas in your community for over 50 years. And you can reserve your next new Toyota with them today. You'll get a realistic timeline, and even in this crazy market, they won't charge you over MSRP. Or don't wait at all. With over 75 certified Toyotas, including a bunch of RAV4 and Highlanders, you can drive one home today. And you can always trust them to maintain your current vehicle. Their service and collision centers are high-tech, comfortable, and will save you time and money. Team Toyota can help you go anywhere you want, but they'll always be your hometown team. Just visit teamtoyota.net and choose from 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton. This is the Phillies Talk Podcast with Corey Simon and Jim Salisbury, and there's a lot to talk about. As you know, free agency has begun. Dave Dombrowski has spoken. We're going to get to Dombrowski's comments on the pitching market and the shortstop market a little bit later. But Jim, the most important news is the story that we've been kind of tracking, which is the Bryce Harper surgery situation. There was, uncertainty as to whether he'd need surgery. Now we know that he will indeed have surgery next Wednesday, November 23rd in Los Angeles with Dr. Neil Elatrash, whose name is prevalent in the sports world. So Harper will have surgery Wednesday, but we don't know yet whether it's going to be Tommy John or a less invasive procedure until his elbow is opened up. So that could significantly change the timeline.
No question. And I think we finally had some clarity there. I think we all felt like he was going to require some surgery, surgical procedure to fix that ligament. There has been some healing. That's my understanding, but just not enough to get to the point where they would forego surgery. So they want to take it the whole way and repair it in a surgical procedure. You mentioned there's 2 options, and that would affect the timeline. And I think that's what people are most curious about, the timeline. When are they going to have Bryce Harper back? Who knows? I don't know, but I would be braced for to not have Bryce Harper for much of the first half if I were the Phillies. I would think that is quite possible because you're going to need recovery and then you're going to need time to ramp up, and that's going to be a significant amount of time. They were without him for 2 months in 2022, and they went 30-22 in his absence, and they're going to be without him for a slice of time in 2023. If it's the lesser procedure called an internal brace, which Rhys Hoskins had a couple of years ago. Hoskins had it early October, was ready for spring training. But that was in a regular offseason when the team didn't play an extra 5 weeks, as these Phillies did, advancing to the World Series. So if it's a lesser procedure, I see him being back sooner than he would be back if it's Tommy John. Tommy John is a full reconstruction of that ligament, involves taking a piece of another ligament and grafting it into that elbow, and it's going to affect, it's going to require a longer rehab time, and it's going to, either way, I think it's going to prevent him from throwing for a significant amount of time. But the good news is, if there's good news, and there is, he's going to get fixed, and they're going to have him back for some period of time in 2023, whether it's half a season or whether it's 4 months, we're going to find out. But he was able to hit with that injury, with that torn UCL in the 2022 season, and he is going to be able to hit and be the DH as he recovers from whatever surgical procedure has when he is indeed ready to go. So that's the next step. We'll wait to hear from the medical team what the surgery was, what the projected rehab time will be, and that'll determine when the Phillies are going to have him back as their DH in 2023.
Jim, you've referenced Shohei Ohtani as a non-pitcher. Well, obviously, Ohtani is a pitcher, but he was able to come back in a quicker time frame to hit from Tommy John surgery than a pitcher normally does. That was 7 months, correct? So if Harper, say Harper does need Tommy John, and say it's 7 months, 7 months from November 23rd, you're talking about like the end of June, maybe the beginning of July. So you're potentially talking about Harper missing like 80 to 85 games if he needs Tommy John surgery. The Phillies did go 32-20, as you mentioned, without him. They did more than stay afloat. They were able to kind of push toward the playoffs. They don't make the playoffs, so they don't perform as well as they did without Harper. Right. But you don't want to test that again. They're going to have to. But it would seem to like Dave Dombrowski kind of avoided answering this directly, but it would seem that the absence of Harper for half the season potentially would have to have some sort of impact on what the Phillies do this winter. I mean, they were probably going to go after a top shortstop anyway, but now the need to implement and add some offense to offset the loss of Harper becomes even more important.
Yeah, no question. Though I think their two big offseason goals, regardless if Harper was hurt or not, or needed surgery or not, was going to be lengthening the lineup. And the one area where you have flexibility, unless you're going to be blowing things up with trades, is the middle infield. And there's a really attractive shortstop class. They're all offensive type players. So, and then the other need I think you have is in the rotation. So, I actually think if you are able to lengthen the lineup with one of those top four shortstops and adding another bat there, that you might be able to absorb or at least mitigate some of the loss of Harper internally. You'd have to get creative. I mean, Derek Hall came up when they were minus Harper's big left-handed bat, and he hit 9 home runs. That was valuable power from the left side. He could be part of a fill-in unit. You sign a shortstop that allows Edmundo Sosa to be in that super utility role. I could see nights where they try to improve their defense by getting Sosa in the lineup at maybe third base, moving Bohm over to first base. I also think Bohm made strides at third base, and you might want to keep him there for, just to send a message that, hey, you're getting better, we believe in you, and maybe play Sosa at first base, allowing Rhys Hoskins to become the DH. So you're essentially improving yourself defensively in those situations while keeping Hoskins' bat in the lineup. They signed a good backup catcher last year in Stubbs. There would be nights when JT Realmuto could be the DH. And, of course, then there's the two corner outfielders. There's nights, Schwarber and Castellanos, when they could be the DH. So I think the Phillies might be on the lookout for maybe a fourth or fifth type outfielder that might be able to come and help you out, or maybe it's one of the guys that they looked at last year coming off the bench. So I think there are ways they can absorb it. I don't know that it rockets to the top of their offseason priority list, filling in for Bryce Harper. Like I said, I think they can do it internally, but that's incumbent on adding that extra bat at shortstop, which I have to say I think they're going to do. I mean, it's a kind of historic shortstop class. The Phillies are a team that will spend money. They have big expectations. They want to win the World Series. They want to get those 2 extra wins and win the World Series. And to do that, you need to bring in top talent. They have a history of doing that. So I think they're going to end up with one of those guys. I should say I'd be surprised if they don't. If that all falls in, I think they can survive Harper for another 2 months. Maybe it's 3 months. I don't know. It's going to be a challenge. He's a great player. And they're not going to rush him. They want him back 100%. He's got 9 years left. He's a big investment. You're not going to rush him. But, I mean, the good news is I think regardless of the procedure that he does have, he's going to come back with an elbow that is, repaired, and he's going to be able to swing the bat as he continues working his way back toward the outfield. Whether or not that's in 2023 or 2024, we'll find out.
This shortstop class, the 4 top guys, Trey Turner, Xander Bogaerts, Carlos Correa, Dansby Swanson. Dave Dombrowski was asked, would you be disappointed if you didn't come away from this offseason with one of them? And his answer was pretty much like, I wouldn't be disappointed, but we're open to a lot of things. Dombrowski also mentioned that the Phillies are going to push the needle. They're going to continue to be aggressive. They have about $55 million less on their payroll as of right now, their luxury tax payroll, compared to where it ended last season. The number is actually higher than that, but when you factor in the raises that some players are going to be due, the pre-free agent players, when you add those factors in, it kind of lowers to that $55 to $60 million range, but that's still a ton of money to get things accomplished. And we're not talking a salary cap. That's the luxury tax, which a team can exceed, which the Phillies did do last year. The luxury tax is going up by about $3 million to $233 million for 2023. $233 million was where the Phillies ended up last season. So you expect they're going to go out and spend comparably to the way they did last year. in looking at those shortstops, Jim, Turner, Correa, Bogarts, Swanson, like, what do you think happens if the Phillies do somehow miss out on all four of them? I mean, there's a world exists where four other teams are so interested in those four players that they splurge on them. I mean, the Dodgers could re-sign Turner. You could have another shortstop hungry team sign Bogarts. There's a possibility the Phillies don't end up with any of them, and I just wonder what would happen then.
I think right now they would play Sosa at shortstop and move Stott over to second base. I mean, they have sort of tipped their hand a little bit that's, in their thinking, because Rob Thompson also spoke the other day, and he said he had a conversation with Stott late in the season. Where do you prefer, a shortstop or second base? And Stott said, I prefer just as long as I'm in the major leagues, which is the right answer. So if a manager's asking a kid that late in the season when you got so much going on, they're having meetings thinking about things. So, but I think they'd probably go with Sosa and, try to lengthen the lineup other ways. It would really be a challenge to your creativity, but that would be the way I think they would go initially. But it's given ownership's desire to win, and I'm not just saying win, I'm saying to win a World Series. And given their willingness to spend to do it, I don't see them getting shut out of this shortstop market. I could be wrong. We could be sitting here later this winter saying, just what you pointed out in mid-November, on November 18th, it's happened. They didn't get any of them. But I've seen this organization in recent years, last 4 or 5 years, not be denied when they really want something. Yeah. I mean, they were really patient on JT Realmuto. They got it done. They went out and acted quickly on Zach Wheeler. They got it done. They were going to come away with a Machado or a Harper. They got it done. Castellanos was lingering out there late last year. They got it done. When they had their organizational meetings 15 months ago, coming off the 2021 season, they targeted Kyle Schwarber right at the top of their list. They got it done. So I think they're going to get something done. There's 4 of them there. You're the World Series finalist. You're the National League champ. You have an ownership group that is willing to extend itself, and you have big expectations and big hopes and big dreams. I have a hard time, and you have a great fit, right? You have this lineup that is not as flexible as you think, unless you're going to start blowing things up and trading guys. And that comes with its own set of challenges, because some of these guys are difficult to trade. So the one area you really have flexibility is the middle infield, and it coincides with this great shortstop class. I think you got to get something done.
There was an interesting piece at MLB.com by Mike Petriello that was examining Xander Bogaerts' defense, just bringing it up because Bogaerts is one of those 4 top shortstops, that Bogaerts this past season graded out better defensively than he had in any year since his rookie season, but the majority of that solid defense took place with positioning and shifting, which is going away. So, when you start looking at defensive grades for a lot of these players, whether they're shortstop, second baseman, whatever, the defensive ability could change with teams not allowed to overshift against a left-handed batter by putting 3 guys on that side of the infield. So just something to keep in mind. Jim, in the starting pitching market, the Phillies have as many reasons to be aggressive with starting pitching as they do at shortstop. There's a lot of guys out there. One name came off the board this week. Tyler Anderson agreed to a 3-year, $39 million deal with the Los Angeles Angels after a career year with the Dodgers in 2022. There are some other pitchers in that same tier as Anderson. There's, Jamison Tyone, Sean Manaea, Andrew Heaney, guys like that. This 3-year, $39 million deal for Anderson, I mean, do you see that as like a template for some of these like second tier starting pitchers? And if so, that doesn't seem like it's that bad of a price.
Yeah. These deals are always templates for comparable type of pitchers. So, and they'll always try to, go above it. So they'll use that as a base, and they'll try to build on that. They're going to have to figure out a way to bring some pitching in here. And to me, it's got to be mid-rotation and above, because I think you have some back-end candidates in Falter, in Chris Sanchez. To me, you got to kind of upgrade that 4 spot. But one of the things Dombrowski said the other day is they're keeping a spot open at the back end of the rotation. They're going to break in a young guy, whether it's Falter, whether it's a Sanchez. And of course, Andrew Painter is on the way, and he's going to be here at some point in 2023. It's just a matter of if it's April, May, June, and it's also a matter of how they're going to protect him, being such a young guy, and watching his innings and having a reasonable jump. So there'll be times when they have to skip him or hold him back and watch his innings or piggyback him when he finally gets here. So the Phillies are not just a team that you're going to look at a 5-man rotation. They're going to be 6, 7, 8 deep as they try to get guys rest, sprinkle in that 6th starter now and then, give guys an extra day. So depth beyond whoever your top 5 is at that point is very, very important. So it's very, very important they lengthen their lineup. It's very important that they get more starting pitching. I'm sure they're going to probe the top of the market on Rondon. He's a guy they like. I know that. But everybody likes Rondon. Stayed healthy last year. He's an attack pitcher. But there are other guys. I mean, Chris Bassett's he's another guy who pitches with a lot of aggressiveness and a lot of edge. I like him. Tyler Anderson was a guy I kind of had my eye on because they tried to pull off a trade for him with Pittsburgh a couple years ago and it fell through. But like you said, he's off the board. But they're going to be involved in that market as well. They really have to be. I don't know what they would trade from their system. It's an improving system, but I don't think it's a deep system. It's not like loaded, but they have some couple of high-end guys I think people like. I mean, obviously the system took a bite when they lost Ohapi, for Marsh in the summertime. But Pablo Lopez could be traded, right? From the Miami Marlins. I'm not saying they would trade for him, but I mean, he's a guy that would pique my interest. I don't know if they can put anything together for him, but I just am saying that they'll investigate trades as a way to upgrade that rotation as well. It's just a matter of what they have to give up.
So, looking at the free agent starting pitching options, for those of you who are not watching on YouTube, we have a little crawl going across the bottom of the screen. There's the top of the class, which is Carlos Rodon. There's maybe the 3 best pitchers of this era are free agents, and Justin Verlander, Clayton Kershaw, and Jacob deGrom. Very interesting to see what kind of contract Verlander gets at age 39, what kind of contract deGrom gets after being really unable to stay healthy over the last 3 seasons. You look like you wanted to interject there, Jim.
Yeah, well, I see the scroll. Good job on that. Because I'm getting like a real-time update on. Honestly, the 2 names that really jump out at me there are Eovaldi, and we talk a lot about Dave Dombrowski's history with Bogarts. I think the history with Eovaldi is maybe more notable because Dave actually, I think, extended him over there, helped him win a World Series as the Bogarts. But I would keep an eye on a guy like Eovaldi, and I would not. Me personally, and I don't have any intel on this, but I would keep the lines of communications open with Noah Syndergaard. I really would, because it just seems like he's transitioning into a little bit of a different style pitcher. He kind of getting it. It seems like he really bonded with the Phillies pitching brain trust, Caleb Cotham and Brian Kaplan and Dave Lundquist. It seems like they really helped him, and he really liked what they were telling him. And then there's the biggest reason he's going to be a year removed and a year stronger after the surgery. Maybe there's something there. I don't, obviously, what did he make? $20 million last year. You wouldn't do that, but I just wonder if that's something you keep an eye on if the price is right. That's all I'm saying, because you have a little knowledge of the guy now, and I thought it was a really good clubhouse fit. I was impressed with him as a I'll do whatever you need. I'm just happy to be on this team. I really like being part of this team kind of guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the same thing. It was a great fit. He talked from day one about how much he enjoyed being here. This is before the playoff run even began. This is months before the playoff run even began. So that Syndergaard said he was on cloud 9 being in Philly in front of a passionate fan base with, a veteran-based team that had some, youth in it and a chance to win. Syndergaard also said at the end of the season that the beginning portion of the season with the Angels, he was kind of learning how to be that other pitcher, that guy who used all the two-seam fastballs and threw 92 miles per hour as opposed to 97, 98. So you could see, better work out of Noah Syndergaard, perhaps more durability in future years. I would think that, when we reference like the Anderson 3-year, $39 million deal, I wouldn't think Syndergaard would get that much guaranteed money, just given the number of question marks.
I would have a problem with that amount and that length. It's almost like he'd have to take a make good and show you what I got and get back out there next year, 1-year deal, which some folks would say he did last year. I just don't know if you can go as steep as the Angels did, but I think it's worth keeping out there and talking about. And like I said, they kind of know the guy. I think they know the elbow, or they might know they might be able to have an educated guess on what the trajectory is going to look like and coming back. And like you said, I thought it was a good fit. So it's something to think about.
Andrew Painter, the Phillies' top pitching prospect, who we just talked about, if he does make the opening day roster next year, he won't even be 20 years old yet, which is just crazy. But something that you mentioned, Jim, in a recent podcast that's pretty important is the fact that they got him over 100 innings this past season in the minor leagues. That is not all that common. I mean, someone who really impressed me this year, a rookie pitcher, George Kirby of the Mariners, a guy who went to college. He was really impressive this year with his command and his velocity. Something Mariners announcers said during a good portion of his starts is this guy's never gotten to 100 innings at any point in his career in college or in the minor leagues. And so the Seattle was very protective of him. The fact that the Phillies were able to get Andrew Painter to 103 innings at age 19, that could factor into the future.
Yes. And we could talk forever on this topic, but I think Mick Abel also got to 100. And I think Griff McGarry came up short. But it was only because he had to miss a little time with a blister and he had that early oblique. So you walk the line, and when you're in player development, between pushing a guy too much and babying him. So they wanted to build workload for their top pitching prospects. The addition of Preston Mattingly as the player development head, he wanted to see his top guys build a workload, not be crazy aggressive with them and do something foolish, but not baby them either. They thought it was very important for their starting pitchers, all of them, not just guys that are top prospects, but obviously you pay a lot of attention to your top guys. They wanted them to start the season and finish the season with their ball club, making starts, not, hit a stop sign on August 12th, or, July 29th and say, okay, you're out of innings, you're done. So, and I think they did a really good job managing that. I think there was a time mid-season when both Painter and Abel skipped the start. So they went extra time between. And then there were a handful of starts when they held them to like 4 and 5 innings. They pulled them back a little bit. So they did a really great job, managing their innings, getting them to 100 so they're ready to make another jump with their young bodies next year and won't be overwhelmed by a jump. And I thought they handled it well. They kept guys healthy. They got them to that 100 plateau. So they're going to be ready to make further jumps next season. And we'll see if that's in the big leagues or elsewhere. But, I think it's possible all three of those guys, Painter, McGarry, and Abel, are all pitching in the big leagues at some point next year. And they'll continue to watch their innings. So you get contributions from them without, damaging those arms. And that's where the pitching depth, like we talked about earlier, I think really becomes important. So when you need to pinch back, you can do that and not have a big drop off.
Jim, I hear Willow barking in the background. Is that her agreeing that, Andrew Painter, Mick Abel, and Griff McGarry could be up by midseason?
That is not Willow. Willow is a much better behaved dog. That is Stella.
Stella, okay.
Who is sort of dog sitting today from one of my daughter's dogs, big, beautiful golden retriever. But she is a big baseball fan, and she's very high on the Phillies pitching crop of Abel, Painter, McGarry. She's eager to see them. I'm eager to see them firing. I'm eager to see Griff McGarry fire, ride that fastball up in the zone by some people, and come at you with that slide ball. and Painter. Really kind of got to speak with him a few times this year. Really impressed with like his maturity. You mentioned 19. I felt like I was talking to a 29-year-old guy who's been through the wars. So they got some pitching coming, but you gotta just be smart with it. Break it in the right way and build that workload. Build that workload. I think it's really important. I'm dating myself here, but way back when, there was a pitcher who I followed. When I grew up in New England, I followed this guy because he was a New Englander, and his name was Mark Fidrich, and he pitched in the '76 All-Star game at Veterans Stadium. And I think 2 years out of high school, out of cold weather high school, where you're not exactly building, you're not throwing 8 months a year, 9 months a year. I think he had something like 2 years out of high school. I think he pitched like 240 innings or 220 innings in the big leagues. And, it just wasn't a good way to break in a young guy like that. So everybody's smarter now. And they'll continue to be smart with this crop of arms that they have coming. And but once, like I said, I think they're really being smart with the building. They got them to 100, and that's a good sign, because you do need workload to become a stronger pitcher, to become physically stronger, and you need those mound reps, you need that experience, and you need that endurance, and all of those guys should be ready for a little bit of step forward next year, be it in the upper minors or hopefully in the big leagues as well.
Yeah, multiple reasons for Phillies fans to be excited about 2023 between the
How many innings did Fidrich pitch? Can you look up that?
Yeah, I'll look it up as I'm talking here. But multiple reasons to be excited between the players they have coming back, the young guys that are going to probably emerge at some point in 2023, and the superstar talent they might be able to add. Fidrich in 1976, Jim, 250 and a third innings.
And how old?
At 21 years old, just a few years out of high school, the guy's throwing.
Well, what year was he drafted? What year was that? 70?
He was drafted in 74, and by 76 through 250 innings.
250 innings. So I was light. That is not how you break a pitch. That is not how you build workload. That is like throwing a guy right in the deep end. So incremental steps in building a workload and turning a young guy into a man and into a pitcher. Let the guy get his man strength, and then you start, turning him loose as he builds that workload. So I always, when people say, they're very passive with pitching prospects, they're not building enough workload. And sometimes I agree with that, but I think you got to kind of walk that line. And I always look at Fidrich as if, we're smarter now than we were in the mid '70s. What would have happened? What would that shoulder look like if he didn't pitch 250 innings just beyond his teenage years? And we're talking in the big leagues, intense innings. You know what I mean? So that's that.
We're going to get to awards season here coming up. All the major awards have now been announced, with the 2 MVPs being handed out on Thursday night. But first, I want to tell you about a different podcast. Opioid addiction is a national public health crisis, and the Someone You Know podcast from Independence Blue Cross Foundation offers inspiring stories that challenge stigma, offer hope, and humanizes the disease of addiction. So download the new season 3 of the Someone You Know podcast on all major podcast platforms. Okay, Jim. So MVPs went out to Aaron Judge and Paul Goldschmidt. JT Realmuto finished 7th in MVP voting, which is his highest finish ever. Aaron Nola the night before came out that he finished 4th in Cy Young voting, which is actually not his highest finish. He was 3rd in 2018, but this is now 3 times in the last 5 years that Aaron Nola has been in the top 7 of Cy Young voting, which is a good indicator of where a guy stands in his league. So, by all accounts, Aaron Nola has been a top 10, top 7 type pitcher over this period of time. He also had the best strikeout to walk ratio in all of Major League Baseball this season. Perhaps the most surprising, or the placement in awards that stood out the most, is that Rob Thompson finished 5th for Manager of the Year. It went to Buck Showalter. Dave Roberts was 2nd. Brian Snitker 3rd. I think some people may be surprised that Dave Roberts managing the Dodgers, a team that had like almost a $300 million payroll, or the Mets, who also almost had a $300 million payroll, had their managers finish so high. What did you make of Thompson finishing fifth? Were you surprised that he was that low?
Well, I would like to say that just because you have a high payroll doesn't lessen the importance of the manager. It doesn't mean you can't screw that up. And Showalter.
No, but traditionally, the award does go to the team that exceeds expectations the most. Like you think,
No question. I thought Showalter kind of buttoned up a messy ship up there, and I know they blew a 10-game lead. I still think he did a great job. Snitker, I mean, they were muddling along, the Braves, until he had that team meeting, and then they just took off. Roberts, you got great talent, but you still got to steer it through the choppy seas of a full season. And Marmol, he doesn't get enough credit for winning a division as a rookie manager. He finishes, fourth? And then you got Rob Thompson, who he could have won it, in my opinion. I think any one of those guys could have won it. It's a subjective choice. It's kind of what appeals to the voter, what resonates with the voter. I mean, Snitker's role would have really resonated with me because, like I said, they were kind of treading water. They lost Freddie Freeman, and then he had that team meeting, and he really struck the right chords, and they really took off after that and had a great run. I was impressed with the way Showalter brought real professionalism to that team. But, having seen Rob Thompson up close, I'm not sure any of this happens without Rob Thompson. I don't think it does. I just thought he came in and was a real galvanizing effect on that clubhouse and got that team pointed in the right direction, got that team, helped to get a few wins, and all of a sudden that team started believing in itself. So I thought he was a tremendous asset to a great Phillies season. And I'm not sure any of that happens without Kyle Schwarber in June and Rob Thompson in June. I think they both threw that team like a life ring because otherwise it could have been the Titanic. So Rob Thompson, in my opinion, could have easily won that award. But I think all of those guys had merit, and it's a beauty contest. It's what appeals to that individual voter, and it is subjective. And I just think, I think maybe he could have definitely finished higher. Like I said, he could have won, but it doesn't diminish the job that he did. He did a fantastic job, and but all of those guys, for different reasons, presided over great stories in their clubhouse, and all five of those guys were difference makers. It just so happens he finished fifth. It jumps out at you. It's a little startling, but I understand it when I consider the other four candidates, and when I reflect on the voting process. Different things resonate to different voters. We saw Rob Thompson up close and kind of were privy to just how important his impact was. A voter from across the country looked at other things closely and was privy to how important another manager was. And that's how the voting works. It's not based on it's not cut and dry. So I still think, Rob Thompson, I saw that picture of all five guys and they all have their head up looking at the camera. He should have his head up because he did a hell of a job.
Yeah, Rob Thompson did not need a Manager of the Year award to cement the impact that he made on the 2022 Phillies, or that he could potentially make moving forward, as he is obviously no longer the interim manager. He is the Phillies manager. That's going to do it for today's podcast. A lot of obviously free agent talk to come. Shortstop, starting pitchers. What will the Phillies do? They're going to spend money. They're going to be aggressive. As we said, there's a big chunk of money off the payroll, $55 to $65 billion. That is a lot the Phillies can get accomplished this winter. So thanks a lot for checking out the podcast. We'll be back early next week.